Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us here at Cloud Wars Live, where we explore today's digital business revolution by speaking with the business executives and thought leaders who are profoundly changing how the world works, lives, plays, learns, and dreams. Our guest today is Pierre-Luc Bisaillon, who's the new CIO at Cirque du Soleil Entertainment Group. And with us.
Thank you, Bob. Great to meet you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I, like so many other people, are enchanted by what Cirque du Soleil does, these incredible performances. We've seen them in the tents, and it's such a powerful brand. But tell us sort of what is the story of the business behind these remarkable performers.
Thank you. It is a great business. I would say, in summary, that we're in the business of awe, in the business of live entertainment. We do see ourselves and are a global leader in live entertainment, which means, yes, we are building on our strength of live modern circus shows as you know them, and increasingly expanding into new interactive areas as well.
And Pierre-Luc, so you are relatively new to the company, about 6 months or so.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to Cirque du Soleil.
Great. So I've had a career basically between mandates in strategy, management consulting with McKinsey, some entrepreneurship in some of the infrastructure as a service areas, and some corporate IT, either on the supplier side with Dell or other large global leaders like BRP, the company behind the Skidoos and Sea-Doo manufacturing brand.
Okay. So you bring a strong sense of not just what goes on with the technology, but above that, the driving forces of, rapidly changing marketplace, consumer taste, and you hinted at a little into your description of the company about some new directions where your employer might be headed there. So anything you can talk about with that?
Well, I think the thoughts I'm trying to bring to Cirque du Soleil is what is technology capable of bringing from a business perspective, right? So that's really, I think, the role of a modern CIO. Technology is important, but it's only as important as the benefits it's going to bring to its consumers and to its business. I think if I had to summarize, and we can explore different areas, but right now technology at Cirque du Soleil is really driving three big areas. One is helping us become an efficient global leader. Because of the scale and the growth and the diversification that we have, we do need a solid infrastructure, business infrastructure. So whether it's finance, HR, IT, recruiting, all of the employees and artists that we have to find to continue to create new shows. So that's one area. The second area would be all of the creative services that are also going through big digital transformations and maybe lesser known to the general public, but even the costumes area is going through major changes, 3D scanning, 3D printing, 3D patterns. So there's a lot happening there. And finally would be the consumer and sort of in-show experience. So all of the relationship we have with our fans, from the first point of contact before the show, during the show, and the lifelong relationship we build with them. So there's a whole lot of topics we can explore.
What you've described is this business of awe.
Yes.
And that's a very powerful value proposition to the market. Could you explain a little what you mean by that?
I mean, everything starts with the relationship we have with our fan at every contact point we have with them, right? So the biggest and I guess the most obvious contact point is their show experience itself. Now, what you experience when you're sitting down and watching is one thing, and there's a lot going on there. We've experimented with an in-app or an in-show app concept. So we are looking at some of these scenarios. But I think the awe happens sort of all around that as well, and it's a really complete experience. And I do think that overall consumers are expecting more from any relationship that they have with any experience that they live. So they do expect the special attention before. They do expect a different experience before, after the show, and an overall sort of, I'm going to say, digital relationship, maybe even at that level with us.
Pierre-Luc, in the U.S. with the National Football League, it was interesting. 4 or 5 years ago, the league did a survey of all the season ticket holders of all the franchises around the country, and a big part of it was, what could we do better? What would make your experience better? And I think it was like 70 or 80% said, we want more TVs in the stadium. We want to see the ESPN Red Zone, which allowed them to watch other games in the stadium. And the third thing they said, put better Wi-Fi technology in the stadium as well. So I remember the league said we were quite surprised by this. And what, in essence, I think some of the fans were saying was, we want you to recreate the at-home experience and let me take the at-home experience and add that onto the physical experience I have in the arena. So when you describe this opportunity to build a digital relationship with your fans that extends beyond the incredible shows, could you give us a couple ideas of how that relationship would play out and how you'd extend that connection?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first thing I'm going to say is I think we have to be careful of the in-show experience itself in terms of what live entertainment is. And I think I will say personally that in this day and age, there's also a value of having less technology perhaps in some of these events. I'll just leave it out there. It's something I think we have to find the right balance with our fans. I think overall, though, in all of the sort of the before, the sort of the complete life cycle relationship we have with them, I think the fans are looking to get to know us a little better. So get to know the artists. What is it like to be an artist? What is it like to be a makeup artist that create all of the makeups? What is it like to work in a costume shop and create those 3D models or use laser etching technology? So I think it's more of an expanded relationship to have that sort of glimpse of behind the scenes, get to know us a little bit better, get to know the artists a little bit better, and then be able to follow, other experiences that they could live with us going forward.
Yeah, that's a great insight there, and you could see a lot of people, especially some of the, I think it would extend across all ages, but especially the younger fans who'd look at that and say, oh my gosh, how did they do that? How did they do that? Is that real? So that magic that comes with it, or the awe. Yeah,
and we have a couple of additional, moments where we're creating now some VIP experiences, or you can stay and meet the artists after, I don't want to make a cheap shot, but take the picture, put on your selfie with an artist. But I mean, it's part of what fans expect today. So we also have to be aware of that.
Yeah. So now for you, Pierre-Luc, 6 months in, how are things going? Tell us about, you've mentioned 3 big areas here, the efficiency, creative, and the consumer experience, but do you have top priorities that you come into work every day focusing on?
Well, I think in terms of my top priorities, after 6 months in terms of my key priorities, the first one is really to reposition the IT organization as an organization who understands digital, who understands business, and that can bring business value. I think we have the good foundation. I think we have the right people. But I do think that's a common theme with other IT organizations, that sometimes they're still missing just that little bit of the right mix of skills and attitude to bring those types of services and that type of value to the business. So focusing on how the IT organization can evolve to deliver that, focusing on harnessing the data that we have, which is another key theme that I think is important, because all of the other topics like Internet of Things or AI or BI all depend on the quality of the data that we have. So I think that's another area that we spend a lot of time on. And then, I mean, immediately, I guess as a priority in terms of business projects, I would say we are spending a little bit more time on that sort of foundation piece, that first piece of sort of building the finance and HR backbone. That's one of the areas where I would say I am spending a little bit more time as we grow to new countries, as we've started to make a few acquisitions and integrate in them. So that's, I guess, on the business front, one of the area that requires some time.
And I think it wouldn't have been that long ago, Pierre-Luc, that speaking with the CIO, the 2 things that you were really keen on from the outset here about strategy and entrepreneurship, those might not too long ago have been classic CIO mindset. How is that changing today in the world here, this digital business and the experience component that you mentioned there? It seems like that's essential now for somebody who's going to drive strategy.
Now, nobody said I'm a typical CIO either.
Correct.
But I think those are essential elements, especially where I think technology is becoming pervasive. And that's something that I think we've had a lot of discussions already. I think even in the past, perhaps to your point, or in a previous model where you would have heard of concepts like shadow IT as a bad thing because, they don't know, and I think we have to be careful that there is some alignment and cohesion at some level. But in 2018, at this day and age, there is IT everywhere. And I don't think our job is to stop it. I think our job is to harness it. And so I think that's really the mandate of the CIO now, is to see how can we let IT be everywhere in a way that is the most productive for the organization. And that means architecture actually plays a very interesting role, business and technology architecture. It means the roles and responsibilities may start to evolve, and I mean, this is something that you hear all the time, but I would agree that you need more IT people in the business and more business people in IT, so that communication is a lot better and that relationship is a lot closer. And I do think that IT has to be a contributor on the IT strategy, but even business strategy eventually.
Yeah, and I always was sort of puzzled by the notion of, again, I think this is changing, which I believe is a very good thing, but CEOs saying, my job and the job of the IT organization is to support the business. And on the one hand, that's true, and on the other hand, what they're saying is I'm not part of the business. So I think what you're talking about is a higher value, deep integration, right? And
now, I'm not saying that that's already accomplished.
Yes.
I do think that it's part of the mandate, or how I see my mandate, to build that and to earn that, I would say, even, because it's easy to say, but at some point you also have to deliver. And even if it means that the first thing you have to do is fix the basics, because if you can't fix that, you won't be able to have the next level conversation either. So that's part of my job too.
Certainly, and it was the first priority that you pointed out. You described as repositioning the IT org, get them more attuned to the business as opposed to being, it's over there and we're over here. And,
and yes, the Wi-Fi has to work.
Right, and so on. So, Pierre-Luc, you're doing some work with SAP, and can you describe how SAP is helping you in this transformation?
Absolutely. So overall, we've SAP has been a great partner. We are partnering with SAP across multiple business areas, including finance, including procurement, including HR. And sort of recent history, we've also engaged with SAP to move to the new S/4HANA cloud solution. So that was in sort of recent months, and we are now looking at how this will be deployed and have an impact and bring us to that sort of next level of sort of financial back-end sort of digital systems that we need to be the global leader that we're trying to be.
You're a young executive here, you're new in the job, the company's doing some wild things. What role does broadly the cloud or cloud technology, how is it helping you achieve and the company achieve its goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think cloud is a broad term that I think is important to define a little bit more specifically. So, I mean, I come from an infrastructure as a service background where that's cloud, and sort of AWS and Google Cloud Platform is what cloud means. I think from a business perspective, it tends to refer to software as a service a lot more, as a delivery model, as a technology model, as a business model. And I think the key part as a business consumer is really cloud is software, and software helps us improve business processes. And whether that means be more effective, save money, make more money, and increasingly perhaps be one of the elements to transform the business. I think that's what technology is capable of doing, and what cloud or software as a service is capable of doing. But of course, software as a service will come from most of the benefits I think that your listeners and readers are used to. So pay as you go, don't have to worry about the technology stack, no big upfront investments, continuous value, continuous innovation, which is also usually the biggest one from a business value. The organization doesn't want to, or the CFO or the board doesn't want me to come and request servers and request database money and upgrade money. They just want to know that it works. That they want to know that they get their value for it. Another theme that I've heard many customers share is the fact that it brings a certain rigor and sort of limits how much damage you could do with local customizations that may not be optimal for the long term. So there's a bit of a theme that once you go to cloud, for something that's not necessarily differentiating from a competitive perspective, you want to rely on somebody else to bring that constant innovation. I mean, I've sometimes used a public transportation or just transportation analogy for clouds, where you used to own the car and now you take the metro or the subway. So the subway will continue to improve. They'll add AC, they'll add new lines, they'll add new things that you keep benefiting from over your long time on a shared infrastructure, right? That's a little bit of the mindset that you have. Now, sometimes it means if they're expanding on the east and you're trying to go west, you have to make different choices, but that comes with the model as well.
Pierre-Luc, this has been great. With anything you wanted to be sure to bring up before we wrap?
No, I mean, I think this is a very interesting time in the industry overall, both from a general IT, and technology perspective, as well as, what's happening really on the ERP or cloud space. I mean, I'm curious, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on sort of what industry will be the next one to be disrupted. I mean, that's always something that, we've seen automotive, we've seen hospitality, we've seen all these industries get disrupted. So I'm curious to see where, all these combinations of technology will continue to push the envelope. That's what I'm keeping an eye on.
Yeah. Well, you think about something like the retail business.
Yeah, that would be my...
Walmart took the name stores out of its corporate name, but at other times you'll still catch them. We've got to be as good in retail as we always were, but we also have to know that it isn't us sitting here demanding that consumers come to our store. We've got to meet them wherever they want to be.
Yeah.
So I think in some ways that what's intriguing is, you line up the 16, 18, 20 industries, they're all going to get rattled. And the interesting place, Pierre-Luc, that I'm seeing is where companies that used to almost like, they were defined by a boundary or a fence. It said, this is your industry, and you stayed in your...
Right,
and now they're saying, well, wait, the money's moving over here. My opportunities are going, so they span industries, and they're defying sort of this antiquated, more physical world definition.
That had limitations and perhaps that are falling now, yeah.
And because it was one that was more philosophical than it was real world. As consumers say, I buy a lot of stuff from Walmart, but 90% of what I buy is online. It has little to do with their store. Or, consumer brands like Nike and so on. You see healthcare companies trying to understand the insurance field better because we have the data now to do things over here. Car companies trying to understand with autonomous vehicles what are the insurance insights that they could have. They're all coming in around the data thing, and I think the data is going to be continue to be the lever that just knocks down these old-fashioned constructs that we've lived by for a while. And they've been helpful in some ways, but they're not as helpful now as they are because there's forces coming from underneath and outside, and little companies, big companies that are just blowing apart the old rules.
Yeah, great.
So in those respects, that's why it's so much fun doing things like this and having these conversations. And it's so exciting what you're doing with Cirque du Soleil. Pierre-Luc, thank you so much for making the time to have this conversation.
Thank you, Bob.
And I also want to thank all of you listeners for joining us here on Cloud Wars Live, where we explore the unfolding adventures of digital transformation and how those are profoundly changing how we live, work, play, learn, and experience the world. I hope you'll join us for other episodes of Cloud Wars Live, and please share your feedback with me at bobevanspa@gmail.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.